The theme of tonight's talk is psychic skills and miracles. And I want to be clear what types of psychic skills I'm going to be talking about. The first sort is telepathy. And when I say telepathy, I'm referring to the transfer of information between two brains along lines that physics would either have a hard time describing or wouldn't want to touch at all. The classic example, the kind of story that everyone has heard most often about this kind of psychic transmission, telepathic transmission, is when a mother, let's say in the state of Maine, suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night knowing that her daughter in California is having some kind of trouble, and wakes up, places that frantic call, "What's wrong?" and then finds the daughter is on the other end of the phone saying, "My boyfriend just went berserk, I was in a car accident," and so forth. Somehow, across 3,000 miles of sheer physical distance, there can be this transfer of information. It's most common between intimates, people who are closely connected, mothers and daughters, boyfriends, girlfriends, married couples, siblings, and so forth. And the next type that we'll be talking about is remote viewing, which I like to kind of characterize as real-time clairvoyance. Remote viewing, and it's always good to define these things even though I think everybody already knows what it is when someone in one location can focus or put their attention on another location and actually get real information about what's going on there. There are some types of psychic connections, some types of psychic skills that I won't be talking about or that my comments here tonight won't apply to. Things like precognition, and I think that there is some validity to precognition, and I'll be mentioning one of the studies where it was validated later on. That involves information from the future to the present. And this is tricky because it opens up what is in theoretical physics referred to as a can of smelly worms. Because getting information from the future to the present breaks down their fundamental assumptions, challenges their fundamental assumptions about the nature of time. And, well, they want us to do as little of that as we can possibly manage. So, we're not going to be talking about tarot card readings, palmistry, tea leaf readings, crystal gazing, or channeling. All of these are in a different class of experience, and one of the things that distinguishes telepathy and remote viewing from other kinds of psychic work is that all you need to do it is a human brain. No tarot cards, no crystal ball, no tea. This isn't what we're covering. And the reason we're not covering it is that the reason that this talk is possible at all has to do with a certain new class of evidence that's come to the laboratory in Canada, where a new technology was used to elicit telepathic and remote viewing in experimental subjects. And here is a picture of the first prototype. This device is known as the octopus because it has eight magnetic coils, or 8 pairs of coils that are arranged around the head. From the top, you can see them a little bit better. These are film canisters, and each film canister has 2 magnetic coils, which are actually adapted solenoids. And there are a couple of signals that have been used in this with this class of technology. One of them is actually called a chirp signal, and I'll be giving you a look at that later on. And the other is one that's actually derived from activity deep in the brain from a structure called the amygdala. And this technology has been used to pioneer a new way of studying psychic perception. What the individual pairs of coils are doing is outputting magnetic fields. And those magnetic fields rise and fall in very short periods of time, like 1 to 3 milliseconds, so that the magnetic fields they're producing actually acquire a distinct shape. It was developed by Dr. Michael Persinger here on the left and Stan Koren on the right. And they are both senior researchers at Laurentian University Behavioral Neurosciences program that's located in Sudbury, Ontario. Dr. Persinger on the left is also my mentor and has We've had a mentor-protege relationship for about, I'd say 13 years at this point. And the first set of experiments that he did with this technology were done with a very well-known remote viewer named Ingo Swann. And the research paper said that he had formerly been employed by an unspecified U.S. government agency. And there is a lot of speculation as to what this might have been. Apparently it was the CIA, but sitting behind the podium, I would like to say that I'm not completely sure. You never know who's going to watch the video, right? So 2 experiments were done with Ingo Swann. Actually, a great deal of work was done, but 2 of the experiments really gave us important information. In one of them, he sat in a room, an acoustic chamber, a darkened room. Actually, he had light, but the room door was still closed and he was in complete silence. And his task, his job as the experimental subject was to remote view a set of photographs. And he had no idea what the pictures were going to be or going to be of, but he would tell them when he was ready, and then someone in the next room would take out one of the pictures from a manila envelope and leave it on the table. The original research paper actually gave the length and width of the table, as well as the length and the width of the manila envelopes they were contained in. Very precise information. He had told them exactly where to put the pictures on the table. They gave him a fair amount of latitude. They weren't looking to prove that he wasn't a remote viewer. This was not a skeptical experiment. They were attempting to validate that he was a remote viewer and setting up the experiment to prove him wrong, but allowing him to set up the environment, to give himself the best chance, the best shot at doing his thing well. And in the other experiment, he was told to remote view certain researchers. He saw them in advance, he knew who he was trying to track, and they went out into areas around the campus of the university and into the town nearby, Sudbury, Ontario, and he would remote view them. Now, while he was doing either of these jobs, he was drawing. Ingo Swann is also a noted artist and actually has a reputation as an artist quite separate from his reputation as a remote viewer. And then 44 students who played no other role in the experiment whatsoever were asked to compare the pictures that he had been remote viewing and the drawings that Ingo Swann had made while remote viewing the pictures, and then to match them up as well as they could, to say in percent, kind of guesswork, but the failings of guesswork disappear when you have large numbers of people doing guesswork. Their read on whether this picture matched that sketch may be inaccurate, but the percent of congruence, the percent of agreement that they assigned to each one yielded solid numbers which could be analyzed. So that's how we go from very imprecise and difficult to pin down procedures like remote viewing to actual quantitative measurements. And this is one of the breakthroughs in this field. It's not just that an amazing new technology has been developed. It's not just that a researcher finally stepped forward, someone with real, with tenure and academic publications and putting their reputation on the line. It was also that a breakthrough in statistical methodology allowed precise measurements of imprecise phenomena, and that's something quite important. Dr. Persinger is many things to many people. Certainly he is many things to me, but where he really shines as a scientist is in this absolutely breathtaking mastery of statistics. So the results of these experiments were that the accuracy of the drawings he made while his remote viewing turned out to be much higher when he was being exposed to one of the 2 signals, and I'll show you that in just a moment. He actually, in addition to confirming and validating his remote viewing and stimulating and enhancing his remote viewing by this means, which gave a real, much clearer idea of what's happening in a brain when psychic skills are being exercised, they also tried to set him up to block his remote viewing skills. And they found that they were able to do it. I don't have a picture of it, and I wish I did. But what they did was they constructed a frame. and put more of these magnetic coils around the edge of the frame. And then they ran a signal through all of these coils at once. And when they ran the signal, he wasn't able to remote view through this screen. So now there exists a technology that will actually screen remote viewing. And the signal that he ran, that was run through these, was very interesting. It was exactly the same as the signals that were run in the experiment, except that where the experiments were producing the signals under DOS, when it was run through Windows, there was this extra component added to the output. And that extra component, which had a kind of fractal, the chaos model in mathematics, is the only one that can describe the additional input that was put in. And when that was put there, then he could no longer remote view. And so they didn't just let him remote view and enhance it. They also found a way to turn it off. And that really lends a degree of certainty to all the experiments that wouldn't be gotten in any other way. It's not enough to make something happen to describe it scientifically. It helps a great deal if you can stop it from happening. So that was the first of these experiments that involved just the one subject. But there were other experiments done with this technology that involved other people, non-psychics, and this is important. The other subjects in this research that I'll be mentioning, none of them were trained psychics. None of them brought any additional skills, cognitive or emotional skills, into their participation in the laboratory. We were dealing with ordinary people with ordinary minds and looking to see how their psychic abilities might be turned on and or enhanced. And in one of these experiments, pairs of intimate subjects, brothers, sisters, mothers and daughters, twins, and married couples participated. And one of them, who did not receive the octopus stimulation, this circumcerebral magnetic stimulation, sat in a room and was shown pictures taken in the local area. So one might be a field, another might be a famous monument. So the other one, sitting in the darkened chamber, again, it's acoustically silent, but they had a microphone, and they were told to kind of free associate, share any thoughts, any feelings, any images that might come up for them while they were receiving this stimulation. And what they found is that the one who was looking at the picture and had been asked what memories they might have had with the other person while they were in that location or nearby, while the other one free associated with no control whatsoever. Then the moments when the subject who wasn't getting the stimulation and was looking at the pictures was compared to the moments in which the person's receiving the stimulation, again by 44 students, each of which gave it an approximate kind of guesswork rating for how well they matched. They found that the matches came up 2.85 times more than they would have by chance alone. The accuracy of their telepathic skills went up almost 3 times. Now that may not be enough to get you a world-class psychic like Ingo Swann, but it is enough to demonstrate that it's possible, under certain conditions, for human brains to share and transfer information between one another, and that's an important result. In addition, they found